Maid yelled, "Stop! Your bride tried to poison your wine!" The millionaire froze in horror. The wedding of the year was supposed to be a flawless celebration of love and luxury. Guests in designer suits raised their glasses beneath chandeliers strung across manicured lawns. Cameras flashed as a billionaire groom leaned in to toast his stunning bride. But then, in a moment that silenced every guest, a maid, dressed in her black and white uniform, stepped forward with fire in her eyes. Her trembling finger pointed at the groom's wine glass as her voice split the air. The shocking words that followed would shatter reputations, expose a hidden truth, and forever change lives that day. The grand estate had been transformed into a palace of opulence. Rows of white roses lined the marble steps, while a string quartet played softly in the background. For many, this was not just a wedding, but a spectacle, an event flaunting unimaginable wealth. At the center stood Jonathan Hale, a young billionaire whose fortune spanned continents, and beside him stood the bride, Isabella, admired for her beauty and social charm. Together, they embodied what magazines would call a modern-day fairy tale. But behind the perfection lingered shadows few cared to notice. Working tirelessly in the background were the staff, maids, servers, and attendants, their uniforms crisp, yet their presence invisible to the glittering crowd. Among them was Grace, a black maid who had worked at the estate long before it became Isabella's playground. She moved with quiet diligence, carrying trays, refilling glasses, and enduring the occasional dismissive comment from guests who never bothered to look her in the eye. Grace had learned to keep her head down, to exist in silence within a world that reminded her daily she did not belong. Yet, as she polished glasses and overheard hushed whispers in the bridal suite, she sensed something was dangerously amiss. The bride's laughter carried a sharpness, a cruelty, and in one chilling moment, Grace witnessed Isabella slip something into a goblet of red wine, Jonathan's goblet. Fear clawed at her chest. She knew what she had seen, but who would believe her? She was just the maid, a black woman in a space where wealth and privilege overshadowed truth. Still, as the ceremony moved toward its climax, Grace's resolve began to burn stronger. The reception unfurled like a scene out of a film, guests clinking glasses, the air thick with perfume and champagne bubbles. Speeches followed, filled with admiration and rehearsed anecdotes of Jonathan's brilliance and Isabella's grace. Cameras panned across smiling faces, and the spectacle grew ever brighter. But Grace could not ignore the image seared into her mind. Isabella leaning close to the wine glass with a small vial in hand. She replayed it in her thoughts, her heartbeat quickening as Jonathan lifted that very glass now, unaware of its sinister contents. Every fiber of Grace's being screamed at her to act, yet hesitation tightened around her throat like chains. She knew her place in the world's hierarchy. A maid interrupting a billionaire's wedding would be seen as insolence, perhaps madness. Worse, as a black woman, her word carried little weight against the luminous bride. Prejudice was not whispered here. It was embedded in every raised eyebrow, every patronizing tone, every subtle dismissal she endured. Still, she had to make a choice. Stay silent, and Jonathan might die. Speak, and she might be ruined. As Jonathan stood with his glass raised high, Grace's hands trembled on the tray she carried. Guests nearby smirked at her nervousness, assuming she was incompetent. She caught fragments of their whispers. They should have hired better help. Always so clumsy. The familiar sting of humiliation burned, but behind it flared something sharper. Defiance. Her mind flashed back to her grandmother's words. Silence in the face of wrong is its own kind of violence. Grace felt her chest tighten. No matter the consequences, she could not let silence become her crime. The music swelled. Jonathan's glass tilted toward his lips. The bride's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Grace's breath hitched, and her legs moved before her fear could stop them. She dropped the tray with a loud crash, drawing every eye to her. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she pushed forward, her voice rising over the music, sharp and unyielding. Her finger pointed straight at the groom. The air grew taut, electrified by the audacity of her interruption, and then her words tore through the wedding like thunder. "Stop! Don't drink that!" The crowd froze, mouths agape, as Grace's cry shattered the illusion of elegance. Jonathan's hand halted midair, wine trembling in the crystal glass. Guests exchanged bewildered glances, some snickering in disbelief, others gasping at the sheer audacity of a maid speaking out during such a sacred moment. The bride's face twisted into a mask of outrage and fear. But before she could speak, Grace's voice cracked through the silence once more, trembling but fierce. She accused Isabella of poisoning the wine. For a moment, chaos reigned. Guests erupted in shocked murmurs. Some laughed nervously, assuming it was a mistake or madness. Others demanded she be removed immediately, their voices laced with disdain. "How dare she?" one guest spat. Jonathan's expression, however, betrayed something different. His brow furrowed, his grip tightening on the glass. He looked at Isabella, searching her face for the truth, and for the first time noticed her pallor and trembling hands. The accusations hung heavy in the air, and though the crowd's disbelief echoed louder than Grace's words, doubt had been planted. Security moved forward to seize her, but Jonathan raised his hand. He wanted answers. The bride stammered, her rehearsed composure cracking under pressure. And as Jonathan demanded the wine be tested, silence swept over the gathering. The results would confirm Grace's nightmare. Poison was, indeed, in the glass. Gasps erupted louder this time, not at the maid's insolence, but at the bride's unveiled betrayal. Isabella's mask shattered as she was led away, her glamorous gown trailing like a tattered lie. In the aftermath, the celebration was abandoned, replaced by whispers of shock and shame. Guests dispersed with unease, no longer captivated by glittering chandeliers or gourmet dishes, but by the memory of a maid who had risked everything to speak the truth. Grace stood alone, the weight of what she had endured pressing heavily upon her. Though vindicated, the sting of doubt and disdain lingered. Many had dismissed her instantly, not because of a lack of evidence, but because of who she was. A maid, a black woman in a world built to ignore her voice. Jonathan, shaken to his core, approached her quietly. He realized he owed his life not to wealth or privilege, but to the courage of someone society deemed invisible. For the first time, he truly saw Grace, not as a servant, but as a human being whose strength defied silence. The story of the poisoned wine would travel far beyond the estate's gates. Newspapers covered the scandal, yet what lingered longer than the betrayal was the question it raised. How many truths go unheard because of the lips they come from? Grace returned to her duties in the days that followed, but her life would never be the same. She had proven that courage is not bound by wealth or status, but is born from conviction. Yet the bitter truth remained. She should never have had to risk everything for her voice to matter. And as we reflect on this story, one question burns brightly. How many times has society silenced voices like Grace's, voices that could have saved lives, exposed lies, and changed the world, if only someone had listened?